All right, so lesson 1. Let's get the slideshow going. Okay, does anyone know what this crazy thing is? This, well, the thing that it's attached to is a locomotive. So this is an old steam locomotive. This is the boiler that's used. You put coal underneath it, of course, heat it up, the water boils, and the steam that's collected from that is used to power pistons that drive the wheels, right? Many locomotives were built by each different foundry or locomotive works over time, and on the so they had what they did. It was a source of great pride. These engines, the engineering behind them. So they put something called a boilerplate on each of those the boilers for these locomotives. So that would be a common piece of text, and the only thing that would change on the boilerplate would be basically the serial number or the number of the unit and the year which was built. Other than that, all of the other text on the boilerplate was the same, right? On any of said units coming out of said locomotive works. With the advent of the printing press, we had a similar thing where you may have a document, whether that's a newspaper, whether it's a series of books that are being printed, and there would be common pieces of that book or that periodical or article. Maybe the content was different, but there were certain things that remained the same. The authors, maybe the title of the periodical, so on and so forth, the branding elements, the name of the article, so on and so forth. So in the same way we had a boilerplate for boilers, for heating water, this idea about a boilerplate was kind of adopted by the printing press, right? So it was often referred to as a piece of metal that fit in there with the other, and then you typeset the rest of the document and rolled it through, right? So this was called a boiler, or a boiler for short. So the boiler. So here's a journal that, for example, would have been put pressed, gone through the printing press. So there's certain things, although each edition the content would be different. There's the contents that you wouldn't have to create issue to issue, right? The boilerplate. So now, okay, fast forward a couple of 100 years or more, and the idea behind a boilerplate still exists even in digital formats. So, for example, here we are being tasked now with rolling out a web application. Well, irrespective of what this web application is to do, who's going to use it, in what context it's going to be used, there are still going to be certain common pieces of text or code that are going to be the same no matter what the web application is. Whether it's Spotify, right, the web app for Spotify, or whether it's the app that powers your Ecobee thermostat for your home online, right, or whether it's your banking at Mobile Financial on the computer, on the laptop. There are certain things, pieces of code, that are going to be largely the same no matter what that web application is or how it's to be consumed, whether it's on a phone, whether it's on a screen on your dashboard of your Tesla Model 3, or whatever, right? So enter something called HTML5 boilerplate, right? So this is an amazing piece of technology, and it's so ubiquitous. It's so everywhere. You use this every day. Every day you use this as a consumer. You just have no idea, right? It's kind of like the electricity that flows. You go into a room, you kind of take for granted, you throw the switch, and the lights come on. Well, that's like this. You use it. You don't give this any thought. We use this stuff every day. So most modern web applications now have a kind of a base kind of framework of kind of bits and pieces of code that do certain things that we take for granted. But a lot of men and women had to work very hard, for very long hours, and had to collaborate over great distances, and had to test and try and break a lot of things before they figured out what is the best kind of foundation for a web application of any description. What are those basic files? What are some of those things in the HTML templates? What are those some basic CSS resets to get the CSS so it renders things look the same across all the browsers? What about JavaScript? How do we kind of bolt JavaScript on so that we know it's going to work no matter where we are? All these kind of things. So a huge team of people have been working on this for years. You can build your own web application without something like this. No problem. Why would you? And I'll tell you, so I'll use a metaphor to explain this. Okay, so someone says, I want you to build and design a new car. Okay, so you get to the point where you're going to put tires on the wheels, right? Are you going to learn how to vulcanize rubber? Or are you going to call up Goodyear and ask them for P155 17 R17s for them? This is the tire company. They make great tires.
Why is that counter-argument?
Absolutely.
You're building a car.
Yes.
And you're designing a shape of the car.
Yeah.
You can either go into a magazine or a catalog and just find a good-looking car, change it a little bit. It's going to be faster, more effective, it's just cheaper. Mm-hmm. Or you can design it yourself, make it actually original. Mm-hmm. It will take more time, more effort. Mm-hmm. It will be original and it might be even better.
Yes, it will cost you more.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the rub. Cost is a very real constraint. So, but it's more fundamental than that. And that's a great, I like that, because there are times when you do want to deviate from a standard kind of platform or framework, right? For example, so if we take the platform of a car, maybe part of what we're doing, maybe we're designing a flying car, an autonomous flying car. That requires us to kind of rethink some of the basic preconceptions about what a car. So yes, I agree with you, absolutely. So it depends very much on the job and what the constraints are. If the really very real constraints are cost, if the job is to come up with something evolutionary, that's one thing. If it's to come up with something revolutionary, then you need to rethink this. And you need to take a hard look at some of these things and say, do we need to rethink all this from at its very? So that's a very good point. So very much it depends on the project on your desk in front of you. But the nice thing about a technology like this is it doesn't make any assumptions about the technology. It doesn't make any assumptions about what it is you're building. It doesn't make any assumptions about who the audience is or what you're using it for or any of those things, right? These are just kind of some basic kind of presets, and you can modify them as you wish, but it gives you a heck of a head start, right? What does this crazy thing look like? So when we're building a web application, and a web application, the files and the directory structure that exist on the server are going to be different for every web application, right? So this is simply a starting point. That's all it is. And the authors make no bones about it. They're like, you'll probably change this, that, and the other thing. That's cool, but at least here's something to get you started. And here's how we put it this way. We've done it because we found that x equals y. And that took us a lot of years to figure that out. And we're glad we figured that out. You don't have to figure that out again. It's all about not learning, not reinventing the wheel, and not trying to do things, solve problems that someone else has already solved. Right? I don't want you guys to solve problems that are already figured out. That's not great use of your time. You're really smart, capable people. I want you guys to move on to other challenges. Do something else. Innovate in some other space. So the boilerplate isn't the solution for every problem. If we thought that way, then if we thought solve every problem as a nail, then obviously the solution is always a hammer. That's not the case. But this is this is the culmination of a lot of thinking from a lot of really smart people all over the world. And even as such, we're going to learn a lot even just going through this, right? Even if you don't use this. But in some ways, you're going to use bits and pieces of this if you don't use it in its entirety in the projects that you build out moving forward. You just are. They're going to be in there. Okay? So this is the site structure as it can be found at HTML5 boilerplate. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick tour through this and learn about why they put this stuff together, what the different pieces are, what the purpose is, why they might be important to you. Okay? Let's first talk about, it includes something called a .htaccess file. Right? What is that crazy thing for? You only need this file on your application if you cannot edit something called httpd.conf on your server. Now, this is where I'd like you to, when you get into whatever office you're working, and and I'd like you to get to know your network administrators, get to know the server admin people, the network people. Like a lot of people just kind of don't pay any attention to them. Buy them a coffee, sit down, get to know them by name. They're great people to know, right? Because the day's going to come, you're going to need desperately to edit this file. If you don't know any people on the hardware side of things, on the network side of things, that's going to be a problem, right? You may not always be able to edit this file. So this is a configuration file which helps the Apache web server with all kinds of behaviors and settings that will need to be controlled to host a web application. So if you can't edit that, the first thing to do is edit this, and you do this in conjunction with your network admin. You may have the skills to do this reliably, but tread carefully, particularly if you're working with a live server. We don't monkey with configuration files on live servers. It's a bad idea. Okay. Not that I'm talking from experience or anything like that, right? If we can't do that, or what this can possibly we can do is we can extend. So the htaccess file sits on and it can overwrite some of the rules or the configurations in that file if we can't edit it. And a lot of times we can't. What does it cover? It covers things like CrossOrigin. So if your web application needs to make requests for images, fonts, or other kind of resources that are outside of the domain of the web application, right? That has to be treated with care. So we have to specify: are we going to allow cross-origin requests, right? Because browsers are getting really tight with security, and so they should, right? You don't want an application, your banking application, to be talking to some other marketing application, perhaps, right? You may not want that. They might, but you know. So we got to think about security from the outset. We don't think about security after we've built everything and added on, right? htaccess also controls things like errors or suppressing errors, right? If you have a 404, we don't want to give someone an ugly error message as an end user, particularly if you're on something like, I like the banking app, because that scares people, right? Remember, you're designing technical things for non-technical people. They're not stupid people. They're non-technical. They just don't care, right? So we can't scare people and give them horrible messages. We got to give them friendly messages. It also covers rendering modes in good old Internet Explorer. Yes, we continue to wrestle with this browser. It is massively improved from the days of IE6, IE7. Okay? Things have much improved, but we still need to address and make sure that we're forcing Internet Explorer to behave as a modern browser. Otherwise, sometimes it goes back to its old, dirty ways of rendering things. And that's when you get things that look different in IE than in the latest copy of Firefox that you pull down, or in your Safari mobile on your iOS device. Okay? So we need to force that thing to behave itself still. Maybe there'll be a day when I don't have to talk about it. Media types and character encodings. So your server may not understand what kind of file an MP4 is. Even if the person's laptop understands. It needs to be served over the network with an appropriate encoding, and it needs to have the appropriate MIME type, multi-part internet mail extensions. This is a technology that's very, very old, but it started up when we first started attaching files to email, because there's your email message, and then you're bolting something on that's a different type of medium, right? MIME type. So you have to, particularly for obscure or strange files, or something different you might be working with. So this controls that. We talk about friendly URLs, right? We've all seen an ugly URL. You go to a web page and there's this big long address. It's like this dot that dot the other thing slash crazy tilde ampersand, bunch of crazy characters, big long number strings in hexadecimal. And you're like, what is that mess, right? That's an unfriendly URL. With htaccess and with certain server technologies like Apache, certain servers like Apache, we can rewrite those so that they're very friendly. Nike/Nike.com/shop/fall 2017. Yeah, actually, I worked on the internet in the 19X's. I started in 1999. So anyway, no. So and also we may need to force the browser to use HTTPS secure over SSL, like HTTP over SSL. We may need to force that. The rules in htaccess can force the browser to use HTTPS, which can be very important, particularly if security, and security is always a thing, right? Particularly if it's very important. Also controls things like security, right? Clickjacking, cross-site scripting, right? Forcing SSL, right? You'll see that even the simplest of sites, you say like, why am I looking at Flipboard in using SSL? Why is it HTTPS for? I'm not exchanging any. All the sites are moving to just encrypt the connection by default. They're all going that way if they have net. So this is one way to do that. Also, htaccess, you can control things in there that control web performance. So compression of resources on the server before they get sent to the client, right? Gzip them up, off they go so they're fast. It's important in a mobile context. Caching, you know, if the user's browser has been on this site in a week, can they use the same header image for the logo, or do we force that to expire after a week in case there's a change to the branding of the company? Right? You can control when resources expire on a user's machine so they don't pull up old stuff. Believe it or not. Cool. All right, so 404. It also includes a standardized standalone page not found. It's not elegant, but it's not horrifically ugly. It doesn't serve something up with no font settings at all. Right from an Apache web server, you know, with the Apache logo and say, page not found, right? 404. Like, that makes people freak out. They stole my information, right? You have to fail gracefully, right? Anyway, this at least gives you something there that looks a little better. All the embedded CSS is there. But this should be customized for your application. So they include this with the understanding that you are going to produce a page not found template that's going to look good and be branded properly. BrowserConfig XML. We'll take a look at this. This is specifically for Microsoft Internet Explorer. Okay? So what this does, they've pre-built this piece of XML to serve up desktop tiles for Windows. So in the Windows environment, your web app can in some ways sort of feel like a desktop app, right? And those lines are becoming very blurred between web application and native application on an operating system or on your phone. That's a good thing. It's good for you, right? I was doing some work on a web application for an organization this summer, and they said, we want an Android app. And I said, why? Well, all this great stuff we're building on the website, I want it to be accessed on the phone. I'm like, nobody wants your crappy app. He said, what? We haven't even built it. I'm like, I know. No one wants your crappy app, right? showed him. I said, look what we've done with the website. And I pulled up the mobile tools on Chrome. I said, there's what it looks like in an iPhone 5, an iPhone 6, a Nexus 6X, right? A Motorola whatever. It's already written. Oh, how did you do that? That's what we do. Mobile first, right? So, the thing is, we want to, so this is one way. This is only for Windows, though. But this XML file basically defines, for the different tile sizes on the desktop, what images are we going to use. And they give you a certain preset. They even provide preset tile images for you. So you can crack them open in Photoshop or GIMP or whatever and build your own. Okay? So that's all been kind of sort of done. BrowserConfig can do a lot more. But this is, at the minimum, they at least set you up to configure Windows for that. Cross-domain XML. A security feature, right? This XML file controls or sets permissions and guidelines for the web app to access resources outside of the primary domain. Okay? This is a big deal nowadays, right? Browsers are getting very, very, very picky about web applications that call out pieces of JavaScript or JPEGs. You can embed malicious code in a JPEG, yes. PDFs, GIFs from elsewhere, right? You really need to try and get all of these resources within that domain, and if they can't be within the domain, you have to control that with something like this. So this is where your web app security team, you can work with them to help you understand how to best optimize this. But you can edit this. It's simple XML. There's a very simple framework for it. It's stuff you guys know how to work with. It's just tags, end tags, attributes. Nothing crazy, right? We'll see what it looks like. Humans.txt. What? Yeah. What about the rest of us? What if you're not a bot, right? Yeah, this is a very people-friendly document. So this is what this document does is it lists the development team for the application. You put this in the site root for the application. List the people the people on the team. Give them credit. Kind of like the credits in a movie, right? A lot of work goes into these things. Give thanks to the contributors, right? If you use a really cool jQuery plugin, give them props here. Why? It only makes you look better, right? It's not like gone are the days where we can pretend that we built all this stuff ourselves. Those days were gone decades ago, right? Give people credit. It's kind of like when you're writing an academic paper for APA. Your instructors are looking also that you credit other people with some of the ideas that you have in your paper, right? Or the people you paraphrase or borrowed ideas from or commented on. This is a good thing. This makes you look smart. And also list the technologies that it employs, right? If you're using some sort of cool compression app on the server, put it in there. That's cool, unless it's a security problem. This is something that's classified. Don't put it in there. But you know what I mean. So put that in there. If you want to learn more about the humans text format and how that's structured, go to humanstext.org. You might have heard of robots. So this is the other side. So if you are a machine and not a person, this is and it's only a list of suggestions for the search box. So if you say, do not index my directory that contains images, so you don't want Google Images, for example, going through your images and pulling them up on an image search, you can say no index images in this file, right? It doesn't mean the bot won't index it. It means you're like, please don't. All right? It's just simply a list of suggestions. But, you know, by and large, from what I understand, the search engines do respect this in principle. So it's still worth including. The index.html page. So this is where we have a standard template for starting, irrespective of whether you're working on WordPress, Shopify, Magento, you're working on a custom app at CIBC Banking. For all of them, essentially at the end of the day, for any app, you're serving up an HTML, a piece of HTML. That's what the browser gets. This is that structure. This is that template, right? It doesn't mean that you're serving up a piece of static HTML. You may be cutting and slicing the bits and pieces of this into different server-side files and gluing them all together on the server before you send them down. That's great. But this is a really good suggestion in terms of how that HTML should be structured. And a lot of good web applications use this, right? In here, you need to make sure the paths to your CSS and JavaScript are changed. If you're moving around these templates, make sure those paths to the resources that you're using are accurate. And also, if you're using Google Analytics, make sure that account ID is changed appropriately. Google's always changing that analytics code in the footer. Always changing it. Just make sure that's up to date. It's fresh. You've got your code in there. Okay. So in the CSS directory, we have a couple of things. One, we have the normalize.css. In boilerplate 5, they didn't include it. I think they forced you to download the recent one. This one, they do throw in a recent. So normalize is just like that can of, before they painted this wall, they would have put primer on it. They just didn't put paint on concrete. You prime it, right? Get it nice and smooth. The wall here, for sure that one, primer, right? So normalize, just make sure all the browsers behave themselves. They're all rendering H1s, H2s, H3s the same size, the same fonts, the same colors, applying the same borders, padding, margins around all the block quotes and the quotes and all that. It gets all the browsers to render things consistently, right? And then you stop from there. So that normalize is there for you. And main.css includes a number of base styles. So these are what they call opinionated base styles. That means they're like, this is the way I think things should be. It doesn't mean that that's the way you accept them. It means that this is maybe in the absence of any other styles, at least this will look decent. And what it does is the CSS is styled appropriately. They add some helper classes, which we'll use today. And they give you a prescribed location for putting your application's CSS code. So it's just a good way to organize your base CSS file. Doesn't mean you have to do it this way, but it's a good start. The JS folder, JavaScript. In there, there's a main.js that is empty, right? So all the JavaScript you're going to use to power your application, they suggest put it in there, call it main.js. Your application may use a different naming convention for these files. That's okay. This is not hard and fast. These are just kind of opinionated suggestions, really. Then there's a plugins.js, which the HTML file template already includes, which extend. So if you have any kind of custom functions that you want to extend or to make use of, say a table sort function for sorting tables, right? Throw it in there, plugins, right? And vendor. So inside JS is a vendor folder. JavaScript libraries are hosted here. Maybe you've got GreenSock in there for animating user interface elements for motion graphics. Throw it in there. You don't have to, but if you throw it in there, then you avoid the cross-site scripting thing. When if you're pulling from a content distribution network elsewhere, you have to then be mindful of it may fail because the browser may say that we won't allow that cross-domain resource. We shut it down, right? So then there's a folder called doc, right? Inside the doc folder are a number of files with a .md extension. MD is a text file called Markdown, right? GitHub uses these a lot for, it's just a format for text, and they render in a very friendly way. It's just simple documentation files. There are tons of stuff. There is tons of stuff in there for you to read through. I encourage you. It's not massive enough that you can't get through it sitting down for a couple of hours. But certainly worth your time. You'll learn a ton, even just reading through something like the Markdown files in boilerplate. You'll be like, wow, I feel like I'm on top of my game. This is cool, right? That's because you've got tons of people contributing to this project. And here's my image credits. those cool photos and illustrations in here. Cool. End. Cool. So let's go back here. So let's head over into learning modules in Blackboard. So each week, I will release a new folder for each new module as outlined in the syllabus. I like to make changes and updates and refresh things and throw some things out, add some new things. So each week you look for the new folder. So we'll head in here for module 1. I call it Interoperability. And most of the all of the resources for any given class will be largely structured in this way, right, where I describe what we're going to do, any kind of places I'd like you to, resources I'd like you to read, some URLs that might be useful, any kind of in-class exercises, labs, so on and so forth, quizzes, and then summary and a lead-in for next week. Okay? So first of all, I'd like you to head over to html5boilerplate.com. Fire that up. So there's one of two ways. Well, there's multiple ways of doing this. You can clone this in Git if you want. You can download it directly here in a zip file and extract it to a local directory. Fine. You can also, if you don't want the default, you can get a custom build. We're not going to do a custom build today. The custom build would be for where a very specific need, where maybe you only need 60% of boilerplate. So maybe for your application, there's other stuff that just adds weight to it. You don't need it, right? So, but if you're doing a custom build of boilerplate, you're doing something very specific, which is fine. So go ahead and we'll click Download 5.3.0. I'll save this to my desktop. Make sure you save this to a COMP2081 folder for lesson 1 this week. Extract the zip. And this lovely operating system actually shows me these system files. If anyone knows how to get, for Mac OS 10 users, I'm obviously, I can't get in the Finder, to show me .htaccess. Can anyone in OS 10, can they actually see .htaccess? Or is that hidden? Yes. So I went into, I've actually changed my settings in my operating system to show those. And these still won't show up. I was banging my head into the screen going, what? Anyway. So, you may not see these files that begin with a dot. So some operating systems hide those because they are system files. Okay? This one is obviously friendly enough. It doesn't matter because our code, if we pull up a good code editor, then they will show those files. So let's take a look here at these crazy things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, hopefully they've got a code editor in here. No items match your search. So there's a new thing called apps here. Well, that's good. I've been validated. Good to know. So fire up your favorite code editor. That could be Brackets, it could be Adobe Dreamweaver, it could be Atom. I totally don't care. Sublime, whatever you want. I'll use Atom because it's fairly friendly. Even Visual Studio Code is good too. If you haven't, if you like Visual Studio, that's kind of just the good stuff, like just the code editor. That's pretty good. I like the cross-platform stuff that works well. Things like Atom, believe it or not, these are all actually web apps. So these are all actually built with HTML, JavaScript, CSS under the hood, anyway, and then just put in a wrapper, right? So it's pretty neat. Desktop apps are you may be involved building desktop apps using web technology, so you never know where you're going to end up and what you're going to be doing. So we're going to go to File here, and we're going to add a project folder. And if we add the boilerplate file version of this and choose that, you can add a project folder in most code editors. Any Sublime people here? Anyone like Sublime? Sublime users? No? Anyone using Atom? Any Atom users? Yeah. Brackets? Anyone using Brackets? Yeah. Great code. I love that. It's a good editor. Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code? What do they call it? Visual Studio Code? Yeah. Visual Studio Code? Yeah. That's great. It's fantastic. Love it. So add that project file. Let's take a look and see what we got here. Welcome. I don't need the welcome. I feel very welcome. Thank you. That's very nice. Okay, so let's take a look first of all at, we'll start with index.html. This is terrific. So you'll see, of course, a doc type, right? Notice how what they do is they add a class called NoJavaScript, Node.js. The reason they do that, we can't assume the end user has access to JavaScript. Okay, it'd be nice. And usually they do. We can't assume it. So this gets removed. JavaScript, if it's present, will actually remove this through something called Modernizer. Modernizer is a capability detection script. It will say, is there JavaScript present? Oh, there is. Okay, let's blow away that class then. Right? But we assume that JavaScript is not working. So we assume very little at the outset. The language here, depending on the country you are working with and the application you're building, you put the appropriate base language for the application here, right? If it's Canadian English, it is EN-CA, right? If it's if we're working in the UK, it's EN-GB, Great Britain. EN-US. Yes, they're different, right? Yeah, if it's German, it's DE. If it's French, FR. If it's Farsi, I think it's FA. Anyway, look up the international country codes. Get that right. Don't get it wrong, because weird things are going to happen, right? You get some weird character rendering. So make sure your base language is specified. Make sure your character encoding. Look at this right off the head. First thing, character encoding. Unicode text format, 8-bit. Good default. Most of the world's characters, used by most of the people most of the time. Right? It took people 11 years to come up with that list of characters. 11 years. Let's use it. Here's a neat here's the HTTP equivalent. This is the equivalent of a server sending a header from the server. And this is saying user agent force IE to edge rendering mode. So it forces IE into the latest rendering mode. Otherwise, it may go into quirks or compatibility mode or something weird, right? The title for your application. Lab 1. Add a title. Do not forget a title. Meta description. This is a good idea to put something in there. Not required, but a lot of search engines will, as a little preamble, will use this if it's present, right? So I would put something helpful in there. And H5BP is the acronym. Okay. Viewport. This is the honesty tag. So we employ this, of course, to make sure that mobile devices zero out if there's any scaling, and they report in their real width. Right? Instead of lying, instead of my crazy phone trying to say, oh no, this is a desktop. It's not a desktop. It's a phone. This thing it repeats it. Right.
For description tag, does it improve SEO too, like searching on something?
I don't really. From what I've read, those days are gone. Particularly things like keywords. Anything that's not visible to the end user has a very low. In terms of, you'd have to talk to an SEO expert. So I only know enough SEO to be dangerous, right? So I'll qualify that, but I will say that in terms of relevancy, if you're looking at search, if whatever you're putting in here is not visible to the end user, it's very, very low on their algorithm in terms of importance.
I've seen like on many websites, if you look at the source, like in row U, when you look at the source, I can see like many keywords in there. Like, yeah, I think they use it for SEO. That's what I thought.
Well, you're going to see people who still cling to that belief that if I put, if I put Viagra in there 50 times, I'm going to be the #1 hit for Viagra. That's called spam.
Yeah.
That's called spam, right? So if you're doing anything that's sleight of hand or even smells slightly like a trick, the search engines will punish you, and they'll punish you hard, and you'll have to work really hard to get your reputation back. So online reputation is extremely important. Do not try dirty tricks. Okay? If you think it might be a dirty trick, don't use it. Okay? Gone are those days, right? I've talked to search engine engineers, and they're like, yeah, if you can think of a dirty trick to fool our search engine, we thought of it 10 years ago. Good luck with that. Like, this is our stuff, right? Yeah.
They're in the same world too, right?
Yeah, they live this stuff. They love it, right? They're crazy. Like all of us. We're all crazy, right? It's crazy. So anyway, okay, so that's, the mobile, we need the mobile rendering viewport tag. The Apple Touch icon, yes. So if someone says save to my desktop on iOS, this PNG will be on the desktop and look like a native app. Include that. Yes, don't ignore. I don't care if you're a hardcore Android person. Step out of yourself a little bit. Say, oh yeah, there are like other people that like iOS. Yeah, believe it or not. Help them out. It's not about you. It's not all about you, right? Put the fave icon in the root directory, right? That's true. That's for bookmarks, right? In the little image up in the tab, you want that. Right away, look, we're also looking at normalizing first. Normalize first. Do not put your own styles in and then normalize afterwards. You know, that's like painting the wall this nice color of like taupe and then putting primer over top of it. You see what I mean? Primer first, then the paint, right? The paint is your finished CSS. Okay? Normalize or reset first, then your styles. I see this all the time. I'm like, like I see seasoned people making this mistake. And it's just, you know, it can really cause you problems. We need to include the modernizer script here. What modernizer does is it goes through, it looks, when the person downloads the app on their browser, say it's Chrome for Android in this case, it looks through and says, what capabilities does this browser have? Can it render SVG? Can it do local storage? Can it do things like access the camera or other or the accelerometer, right? Or does it do Flexbox for rendering? And what happens is Modernizer does that capability detection. It gets rid of that, and it writes a list of all the things the browser can do up there in the class, right there. And then you know, with your CSS, you can design your CSS to support those things. It does it all for you. It's really cool, right? But it has to be, there's a reason why they put this here, and they don't put this at the bottom of the page. We want to know first, before we get into rendering the HTML, what the browser can do. Okay, so then we get into the body. So this is cool. This here, anyone recognize what this is? What is this crazy thing here? Internet Explorer. What are these crazy tags for? Anyone recall? Starts with a C. Conditional comments, right? So this says only IE can read this. Everything else just thinks this is a comment because there's the start of a comment tag and there's the end of the comment tag. But Internet Explorer says, oh, I know what this means. If I am less than Internet Explorer 8, then it renders this. So if you're on IE 8 or below, this paragraph will actually render, and it will say you are using a strong, outdated browser. What are you doing using IE 8, man? That's crazy. Call your IT department. This is nuts. Okay, so what they're saying is IE 8 or less sucks. And the IE team would agree with you. They're like, yeah, it sucks. We fixed it. It's called IE 11. It's called Edge. It's good. Let's turn on the toggle soft wrap. There we go. Okay. Hello world. This is HTML5 boilerplate. Cool. So let's put in a little bit of, let's put in here, just after here, so after the site or application. This is where your content, this is where your HTML will actually go in here, right? BP. Oops. Okay, put in a tag of some sort. Throw it in there. Okay, that's cool. Once you've done so, all of your HTML markup will go here. All of it. All of it. Okay, the whole thing, the whole interface, all goes there. This here, starting at line 26 and below, these are the last few scripts that we're bolting on before we close out the body and close the page. That's it. All your content goes in here. That's what we're saying. It's just a template, right? So all your stuff goes in there. You can save that. So here we notice how we're leaving the domain. So this would be a cross-site resource, right? We're probably leaving. So we're going to something called a content distribution network, a CDN, to pull in jQuery, right? That's cool. So yes, and if JavaScript's enabled, we can actually write our own script tag and instead include the local jQuery, perhaps saving ourselves a trip across the internet to pull down that library. Now, a lot of times these things will be stored in cache, in the browser's cache, because jQuery is very common, so there won't be an additional network hit. But this is pretty smart. This is pretty savvy, right? Then, of course, we want to pull in any plugins from the, and then, of course, once we have a plugin, then we have our main. So it's kind of JavaScript's kind of backwards from CSS. CSS, we do our normalize or reset, and then we have our custom CSS. With the JavaScript, we pull in all our code, our dependencies, so our script libraries, our plugins, and then we use our custom JS. Okay, that's cool. Here's where I talked about the Google Analytics code, which changes seems to change every other week. There's where your account goes in. Okay. Don't ask me much more about Google Analytics. I'm kind of a Google Analytics dummy. It's not a thing. Okay? That's why I hang out with people who know this stuff, because that's their thing. That's cool. That's neat. No, I know the basics, but that's about it. So there you go. That is a tour of the HTML. So we'll save that, and then we'll head over to your browser, whichever one you want here. And Control will just open it locally, have a look. F12, you can use your browser, your dev tools in Internet Explorer. It doesn't show me the generated. It doesn't show me the generated code. I think Chrome will, and it will show you rewriting that there. Let's see if we can. We have Chrome locally. No, no Chrome locally. It's all different. Bear with me. So right-click Chrome for inspect, and you can see here, if you look at the elements here, you can see how because Modernizer detected that this has a lot of capability, you see class here, Node.js was replaced. Can you see that there? It's kind of small. Hold on. Is that a little better? So the class that used to say Node.js, it rewrote that to say JS. There's JavaScript available. It detects that. And these are all the other features of the capabilities of the browser that this particular browser has. Right? Now I know. Right? And my CSS, I can write that. You know, if I can say HTML say for example geolocation, and then I can have visual styles that will only appear if the browser is capable of geolocation. Otherwise, I don't need maybe navigational visuals. If the thing can't geolocate, what's the point, right? Cool. Let's go back here. That's great. Let's take a look at then CSS. Go into the CSS folder. There's Normalize, fairly recent version of Normalize. And if you look at main, so what follows is the result of much research on cross-browser styling. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your own thing, but it does mean that this is the product of, this is the idea that no one is as smart as all of us. You ever heard of that? The whole web was built on that idea. No one is as smart as all of us. So that's why we have things like Apache. That's why we have things like ECMAScript, JavaScript, because everyone contributes and makes it better. So these opinionated defaults are helpful. So look, we apply our base font sizing, our line height. So open up that default line height with browser's default to 1, set up to 1.4, open it up so that text is easier to read. Browsers suck at rendering text. They suck. They're awful. We know this, so we fix it right away. Pure black text on a pure white background. With the screens right now, with the contrast ratios that we have on these screens, that's too hard on the eyes. It hurts. We know that. Let's soften the text and make the text a little like a gray rather than a pure black. It's just too hard on the eyes. It causes eye fatigue. We know that. Let's fix that right now. So, you can change all this, but it's great to read this stuff. It's really neat. So there's things for like pseudo classes for like Mozilla. When you select things, they feel that the selection marquee in Mozilla is nasty looking. So they fix it a little bit. They tune it up, right? Selection, we changed the background color for selection. Let's take a look at here. I don't know, is that a different color blue? Text shadow, none. Turn off text shadowing when you select something. That makes sense because it makes it hard to read sometimes. A better looking horizontal rule. Instead of that faux 3D kind of thing that looks like it's right out of the 90s. Oh, fix it. Done. Just make it a 1 pixel, dark gray. Clean it up a little bit. Fix rendering that we have across browsers for. So this is beyond Normalize. Normalize gets things working consistently. This makes things takes some of the rough edges out of the rendering of those browsers and makes it look a little better. Unless you have a good reason to change this. Field set. Change all that. Get them considering rendering properly for forms. Text area. Resizing. Vertical. As well as horizontal. I think that's what that means. I haven't seen that before. The browser upgrade. If they're using IE8 or less, this is a style to capture that, right? If that doesn't render, we don't even need to worry about those styles. Here's where I want to show you this. Authors, custom styles. This is where your stuff goes, right? So these here, if we talk about the CSS cascade, there's a reason why we set these first and normalize before our styles. Primer on the wall, then the paint. That's all. Order of events here. So you put in your own styles here. So let's just say, no, I want to size up the text a little bit. Maybe I want to make the color, change the color a bit, make the font size a bit better. Leave that in place. And we'll write our own HTML, put a selector in here, open that up. Font size, and we'll put 2EM, for example. Boost that up. And the color, we'll change it to maybe a little darker. Your own stuff goes in here. Maybe the background color. Maybe we want to make it, I don't know. Linen. Change the background color of the page. Okay. Helper classes. .hidden, right? So this means that if you add a class hidden to any of your pieces of HTML, it will not render. Not only that, in the context of a screen reader, display, like if someone can't see something, display means read aloud. So if the page is being read aloud, and maybe it's an instruction on a car. Maybe it's an audible interface in a car. So don't just think about people who can't see. Think about people who shouldn't be looking at a screen at 120 kilometers an hour, right? These things are happening, right? So this means display none. And look, they feel pretty important. They feel pretty strongly about that. They use the ever dangerous important tag, which breaks the CSS cascade. So they feel very strongly. So then we go over, that's cool. So we head over to index to our H1. And it's gone, right? And not only that, if it's a screen reader, it's not going to read it. It's do not pretend it does not exist, even though it's still here, plain as day in the body. Right there it is. Okay. Helper classes. Why not? What else we got? Oh, I'm in the CSS. So I got lost. Visually hidden. So this is important too. Hide it visually, but have it available for screen readers. Right? Maybe there's an audible interface to a piece of an application you're building that you want to be read, but you don't want it to appear on the screen. Right? I don't know. I was at a trade show this past spring, and I think it's called iHeart Radio. It's a really cool app where you can pull down, they'll stream like radio stations from all over the world, right, on this, and they're collecting more and more all the time. And so like these kind of interfaces, these are all web protocols that are pulling this stuff in. It's going to be where you're going to be pulling this stuff in your car or anywhere, right? So a lot, maybe in some instances you can't have people looking at a screen. They have to be audibly controlled. So visually hidden. Hold on a sec. And if you have a smart code editor, it will recognize that CSS. See you later. Right? It's still there, but it's not visually hidden. If there was a screen reader, it would read it. I'd like to be able to find. I've looked for years and years, and I haven't found a plugin or an extension for Chrome that they're all very expensive for screen readers. So one day I'd like to find one that I could bolt on here and actually try this stuff. I haven't been successful yet. If anyone knows of a good screen reader as an extension to like Chrome or Firefox or something like that, let me know. Send me a link. I'd like to find something where we can demonstrate this a little more reliably than just talking about it. Cool. Yeah. Yep.
One called ChromeFox that we use for the accessibility class.
ChromeFox?
Fox, like VOX.
ChromeVox? Okay.
We use that one. It seemed to work.
And it works okay. It's pretty good. Like you would respect this kind of and behave like a normal screen reader.
Yeah, it does. It works
Yeah.
really well.
Now, is it a developer tool, or is it actually is it something that people will actually use as a product?
I think people actually do use it as a screen reader, but we were using it for accessibility to see what the screen readers will do with the code we're doing.
ChromeVox, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try it. Thank you for that. Cool. Then I'll try this. I wonder if I have the ability to. Extensions? Where are my extensions? I don't know. This might be locked down because it's on this podium machine. Let's see. Can I have it? Can I have it? Yes. Let's see. Let's see. All right. I might have to restart Chrome. Do you have to restart Chrome to get it to go?
I'm not sure. You have to enable it in your extension.
More tools, extensions. Come on, baby. Ah, I don't know. I don't know. These are locked down pretty much.
That's weird.
Yeah. All right. I'll try it. I'll see if I can get it working. Oh, maybe. Maybe there's hope.
Lab 1. 2081 Advanced Web UI Design. Check. Lab 1. 2081 Advanced Web UI Design.
It's
Pending open. Lab 1. 2081 Advanced Web UI Design. Extension. Window.
I don't know. Let me go back to the code. I'll remove the hidden. This one. So visually hidden. So it should read hello world, right?
Lab 1. 2081
It's kind of titled.
Advanced Web UI Design.
It's kind of titled.
5
That's the one. The first one that's down there.
Okay. Interesting.
3 of 5. 1 of 5 has been closed.
Maybe I have to axe this.
5 of 5. For example, page 5 usage. Hello world. This is HTML5 boilerplate.
Love it when playing comes together. All right, thank you. That's cool. That's fun. I love it. Okay, so there's our CSS. Visually hidden, focus. So there's all kinds of other things like allowed something to be focusable. So when navigated by the keyboard, that's interesting. So you could tap through it with the tab key, even though it's not visibly on the screen. Again, it depends on an visibility hidden. So hide visually and from screen readers, but maintain the layout. So this would just, and there's clear fixes, of course. If you have float problems, they've left in .clearfix classes. That's cool. And some basic media screens. Example media queries for responsive design. So these would override the primary mobile first styles. Modify as content required. So here's you would bolt in. They've got extensive print stuff so the printed version of the page looks reasonable. So you don't have to rethink that. Obviously, you're going to want to maybe add some branding to that or address that. So that's CSS. So your CSS goes in there. And then your JS, your JavaScript. So I'll show you, there's the vendor. So we have jQuery. There's Modernizer. They're compressed, right? They get rid of all the white space. That's not meant to be human readable. Neither is that. It's meant for fast network transfer. Okay? jQuery. Yeah. jQuery, Modernizer, which did all of this stuff up here for us, which...
Then the last one comes 2081 advanced.
Can I turn this? I got to turn it off. Turn it off. How do I just turn it off?
Yes, go back to your extension.
I think I have to disable it. That's cool. That is really cool. See ya. Bye. Thanks. Thanks. That's cool. So there, yeah. So there's your that here. This is from all of that Modernizer stuff there. Right? There's Modernizer. Notice main.js is empty. You put your own JavaScript in here. That's for you. Okay, whether that's jQuery, whether that's plain old JavaScript, which I like. This is cool. I like to see us move away from relying on frameworks where we can. And any of your plugins will go here. So here's a simple JavaScript function that avoids console errors in browsers that lack a console. I didn't even know that was a thing. Right? You might, and there's these obscure things that come up, and you're like, "What the heck is that?" Isn't it nice that people have found these crazy things and they solved them, so you don't have to spend Friday night in the office when you don't want to be there fixing some weird error on some browser that some client's freaking out about? It's not cool, right? This is a problem to solve. I love it. I'll show you some of the other crazy things. So, for example, there's what humans text looks like, right? If you want to read more about how to flesh that out, you go to humanstext.org. There's lots of documentation on that. BrowserConfig XML. This is just XML, right? There's nothing fancy about this. Once you learn, if you're working extensive, your app is working extensively with Windows users, and you want to kind of make it do some interesting things with the operating system beyond or just slightly outside the browser, learn more about, follow that link. Read. It's great, right? The Microsoft Developer Network is fantastic. It's really good. So this shows them, this just allows for the tiles. So you say, add this to my desktop or a link to my desktop. And the tiles here, here's the tile wide. Single tile. There you go. So that's, and cross-domain, again, cross-domain, this is just XML. You guys know how to edit XML. It's just like HTML, except the tags are different. It's a controlled set of tags as described by the document type declaration at adobe.com. So Adobe designed this subset, this own kind of tag set using XML, right, to control cross-domain policies. That's really cool. You make, if we think about security, and security is a big deal, you think of the internet. Have you guys read about all the security problems with Internet of Things lately? You're going to get into this. That whole industry has to grow up, has to wake up and smell the coffee. Yeah, right? I'm waiting for the day when my thermostat's going to get hacked. It's going to happen, right? What's going on? Why is it 50 degrees in here? It's like, what the heck? What's my thermostat doing? Yeah.
They already brought down the whole internet connection somewhere in Africa and a country.
Yeah.
With Nehemiah, I believe, with just DDoSing all over the world.
Yeah. Well, it'll happen. My thermostat's going to go down. But all kinds of things. My toaster's going to go. Who knows, right? Yeah. Security first. What else do I want? There's BrowserConfig, htaccess. I read all of this from start to finish. I would like you to read this from start to finish. It's a rather long file, but you will walk away feeling like a server administrator once you finish reading this. It's the comments in here are very well done. If you're interested in something like CORS, which is CrossOrigin Resource, I can't remember what the S stands for. I can't remember. CORS. It's for CrossOrigin resources. Read up on it. And all this is this is just a config file that the Apache web server is looking for, and it will trump or override any of those files in the http.conf. Read it. Pick through it. Yeah, it's long, but you know what? Put on a strong pot of coffee. That's what coffee's for. Get you through stuff like this. Yeah, and it's it's very, very well documented. Talks about character encoding, right? Who knew that VND, GeoJSON? I just learned that right now. That's cool, right? There's a JavaScript object notation for obviously geographical information. That has its own MIME type. Neat. You might be called upon to do some work in that space. Maybe you'll be working in GIS. So there you go. There's htaccess. There's the 404. What else have I not covered? And here's here's the documentation. So you're not sure about any of this stuff. Oh, okay. Let's take a look at usage. Here you go. They walk you through how to do it. Brilliant. I love it. This is good quality stuff. Okay. So I'm going to let you just go on I know I've blown. Today's a bit weird because I have all that housekeeping stuff at the beginning of the class. What I'm going to do is we're going to take I'm going to introduce you to lab number 1. So what I'd like you to do here, this is a short challenge I'd like you to try based on what we've all done together here and what I've talked about. So I can just ask you to do this and just take it a little bit further. I'll show you. I'll bring this up on the screen. Where's my blackboard? Okay. What's this? Boilerplate. That's cool. Lab 1. So here's lab 1. So what I'll do is I'll mark this right here in class. So I'll come around. I want you to attempt. There are 10 different things I'd like you to do. Follow the instructions. Just read the instructions. Any of you who follow SpaceX? Just read the instructions, man. Follow the instructions. So I'll have you download this. You've already done that. And then I want you to take this piece of text, boilerplate. This is just a text document. Okay. I'm going to nab this document, and I want you to build the HTML for this content. Plug it into boilerplate where the HTML is supposed to go, right? Then I want you to, I'm getting all over the place here. Lap 1. No, where's my... I don't even know where I'm at now. Where am I at? Is this it? This is it. Okay. So take the boilerplate text, build that out, flesh that out using HTML tags the best you can. Validate it. Try and validate that piece of HTML. See if you can do your best to solve any.
Text for a moment.
You want me to open up the text file?
Yeah. Just for a second.
Yeah. I'm not going to be able to find where I put it.
Are these strange characters at the references?
I think that's a character rendering problem in IE. Let me see here.
I have them here on Firefox.
You have them on Firefox as well, so maybe I messed up the code in character encoding. I messed up the character encoding on the text file.
It's like
I think it's just a quotation, an opening quotation.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my bad. I'll bet you I broke that. Let me see.
I mean, it's not a big deal. I was just curious if we have to incorporate it in the website.
No. Use just a simple quote. That's my bad. I'll save this down to the desktop, and I'll open up with a code editor. I'll see if I can. Where's my text? Open that. Oh yeah. So look, it seems to be okay in if you open up boilerplate.txt in a code editor. Oh no, it's weird. You're right. That's a weird quote. It's messed up. It is. It's messed up. Good eye. An eye for detail.
Indeed.
Sweat the small stuff, man. Isn't that what Chris Hadfield said?
I have no idea.
Sweat the small stuff. Cool. There you go. So decide what HTML tags surround this content. You guys should, what's a header, what's a Q, what's a paragraph. You don't use plug that into this right here. Where does the HTML go? It goes right here. Plug it into there. Okay? Then follow the rest of the instructions. So I'll give you each, I'll let you hand up this side of the table here. So if you want to just hand it along. Hand it. Like that. When you're done, call me over. I'll mark your lab on the spot. Punch that mark into Blackboard, gradebook. Okay? Feel free to take a 5 minute. If you need to get up and stretch, go and use the take a biology break. That's cool. See if you can get this done before 5 o'clock. So assigned reading, I want you to go down. I want you to go through the Markdown files in boilerplate here under doc. So there's CSS, extend, FAQ, HTML, Markdown, JavaScript, miscellaneous, table of contents is just for you to navigate or usage. Failing that, if you don't want to read it in the code, you can simply go to for the Markdown, you can go to GitHub. So, for example, if you go to HTML5 boilerplate and you go to docs, right? Here's the Markdown right here. See? Maybe that's nicer to read than reading the code. That's what I want you to read. Read the docs for boilerplate. Very cool. I'm going to collect your tags.
close. I think they close at 4:30. I usually do 48 guys next day. Close, but they're super nice. So yeah, so if you're stuck and you don't have one for class, you will need to. So you know, you can do the lab at home and then submit it to the assignment board.
You want to find the cap for my green marker?
What?
No, you don't need to do